Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Ashtongleckman, and welcome to my overview for Metropolis Ark III. So we are going to be looking through this track that I've composed just as sort of like a little test drive, and I'm going to take you guys through and play you a little bit of the content from the library. Orchestral Tools did do a screencast where they went through and played everything, and since they did that, I'm not going to go through absolutely every patch, but I am going to show you how I use some of the patches in this piece, and then also how I used it with these other libraries, and in the context of, other libraries. So first things first, let's just go ahead and play the cue. Again, welcome, grab a drink, happy holidays, and thanks so much for joining me. And here's the cue. Alrighty, so there's the track. Let's just go ahead and head into the interface and take a look at what we have going on here. So here's Metropolis Ark III, and the library is formatted similarly to how the other libraries in the Metropolis series are. So you click on the main folder, and you're introduced to the time machine patches, the single articulations, and the multi-articulations. So the multi-articulations will have, as you can see here, multiple articulations pulled up within the exact same patch, so you're going to have more memory, but you're going to have much more accessibility to all the separate patches, and you can go between them using key switches. So if we go into the single articulations, you can see we have the beating orchestra, which is our first district, and the districts are pretty much their way of dividing the different sections. And so we have the beating orchestra, which you can see we have string orchestra, string quintet, woodwind orchestra. You can just see how many articulations are in here. Brass orchestra, percussion orchestra, and then we have percussion ensembles. So we have taiko ensembles, percussion ensembles, timpani ensemble, and ensemble menu. In District 3, we have our solo percussion stuff. So our solo taiko, solo percussion, percussion menu, grand piano, solo menu, and auxiliary percussion. And then finally, we have our orchestral sections where it actually splits it up. So the main orchestra in Metropolis Ark III is split up between high and low, similarly to Metropolis Ark I. Metropolis Ark II introduced the midsection, but Metropolis Ark III is back to using just that original sort of two-section platform. Then we have our high-low winds, trumpets, horns, and brass. So, and the other thing about Metropolis Ark III is similarly to Metropolis Ark I and 2 as well, but more 1 in terms of the overall aesthetic. The brass is super punchy and in your face, and it's fantastic. We're going to run through some of that stuff after we do this. So in addition, we also have the multi-section, and you can see these are sort of combinations of multiple different patches. This is just an example of one of them. And if I just play it, you can hear... It combines multiple different parts of the orchestra to create one gigantic orchestra patch, and then you can just sort of sketch your ideas out. It's fantastic for that type of stuff. And you can hear we have the trumpets, and then the high woodwinds, then our horns. So that's just one example of the multi-section. And so then let's just go ahead and dive into some of the sections and take a look at how this library actually sounds. And then we'll dive in and take a look at how I use the library in the context of this piece. So, alrighty, so we are now going to take a look at the various sections and what it really offers to your palette. First things first, if you guys haven't seen the capsule engine before, you can see here we have our articulations. And if you were to pull up the single articulations patch, you would have the dynamic indicator in the middle where it would show what dynamic range you're playing in. So mezzo forte, forte, etc. That's going to be your main dynamic range for this library. Here you have your mixing page. So you can see here we only have the close and the tree. And then here we have our settings. And niente pretty much means that the dynamics will go to 0. And then, of course, we have the very complex settings that most people don't change. But if you want to, that is, of course, your choice. But I don't even know how to use. Okay, so let's take a look here and just play around with some of the patches. All right, so let's move into our percussion section. As you can see, we have District 2 and District 3 for percussion. We have percussion ensembles. Then we also have solo percussion. So if we go into ensembles, and for example, the low drum ensemble, we'll just look at a few of these. You can see it's just a huge, huge sound. Super, super awesome sound. Let's take a look at some of the wood percussion we have. And let's go to our solo percussion. Take a look at what we have here. I love these solo percussion instruments because they have a much more boomy quality to them. It almost sounds like the drum that started off the Blade Runner 2049 score right at the beginning when it's just wow. It sort of sounds like that. Let's see what some of these sound like. Then we have our sort of higher end ones. Then we also have a grand piano. Cluster tights. Plucked. This is what we have going on there. Then we also have some auxiliary percussion stuff. So you can see we have a stick ensemble, a lot of weird stuff. And there's one specific one that I loved a lot. Here's the sticks. But the plastic tube, man, super, super awesome. It's super odd, but it's like you sort of know what it is, but you're like, what is that? It's very, very cool. We have some metal. And I love these sort of like repetition notes that lead into, because they have a whole lot of that also in the orchestra itself. And I'll show you some of the stuff that I use in regards to that, but a lot of this sort of like upbeat stuff, they have a lot of that. All right, so now let's venture into our sections category. So if we open this guy up, you can see we have our various orchestral sections. We have high strings, low strings, high woodwinds, low woodwinds, trumpet ensemble, horn ensemble, and low brass. And within each one of these, you can actually find all the separate articulations, and that allows for you to, first of all, save a whole lot of memory. You can see we're only running 6 megabytes right now, and if you just load up, for example, a staccatissimo patch, now you're just dealing with the trumpet section. Wow. Or, for example, the horns. That is really in-your-face brass, I gotta tell you. But it really allows for you to be able to, a lot of people like to use single patches, including myself. I like to be able to just have one patch dedicated to one thing. I don't like key switches because different articulations can be treated differently. For example, I use different styles of reverb when it comes to using shorts versus longs, because of the decay of the instrument is very, very different, and the way that I handle them is a little different. So I personally like single patches, and I like the way that this is laid out. Because usually when I'm looking for something in the library, I'm looking for one specific thing. So, maybe I'm looking just for a staccatissimo, or just for something that can add a little bit of like flair in terms of an effect or something. And this allows for you to dive into each section and get exactly what you want. So they give you the possibility of doing that, but also they give you the full orchestra as well. So it's pretty awesome, the amount of stuff that's in this library. And if you guys want to see more, like a more intensive walkthrough, you can check out Orchestral Tools' screencast that they did of the library. So let's take a look at this piece. As you can see, we have this sort of interesting string line that's running through it, the first section, to add a little bit of movement. And this is from the string quintet. As you can see, this is the staccatissimo articulation. And that's the thing that I love. Like, I haven't heard of a library that, first of all, recorded a string quintet, and second of all, the rawness. It's just so in your face and intense. And a lot of people might say, oh, just get get 6 string, like solo string patches and put them together, and bam, you get your string quintet. But it's the way for which the instruments actually interact in an acoustic environment that makes it so incredibly useful, because you have that real sound of 6 players in the same room reacting acoustically that you wouldn't get if you just put 6 solo instruments together. And that's what I love so much about the library, is that it opens up the door for you to have things that beforehand you literally didn't have. So it's an awesome little thing in there. The quintet is definitely my favorite aspect of the whole library. So you can see here we have some really cool different cluster effects from the quintet. And all it really does is it adds another sort of dimension. These effects add another dimension to what we have going on, and it adds a sense of movement and a sense of urgency and sort of action. And then these guys are some repeats, and this is an example of how you can use sort of a repeat to lead into a bar. So da-da-da-da-dun, and then it lands on the beginning of the. So this is what that sounds like. So that's pretty neat. And then we also have these quintet short crescendos. Oops. Here we go. So then we have these upbeats, which is how we start off the piece and how we sort of make those specific moments that we want to really puncture, really hit hard. And then the second section, the main reason I chose to compose it in this way, I just really wanted to show how this library can really just like stab you, like right in the chest, just boom. You know what I mean? So I use these clusters, low clusters, which have this very aggressive in-your-face tone, and I put those and doubled them with the bass trombones in Metropolis Ark I. So that gives a pretty cool overall sound. And then we have these cool sort of woodwind half drops, and this is an articulation that you can find in other places in the orchestra in this specific library. But the way that these work is that if you want to play, for example, a D, you have to play an E flat or D sharp, depending on how you're talking and harmonically. But so it goes back a half step. So this is, you know, a D. You have to play the E flat to play the D. So then let's move on to what we have going on in terms of percussion. We don't have a whole lot happening in terms of percussion. We just have these sort of low hits, and that's just because the piece didn't really call for this really low thudding percussion stuff. But it's definitely something that I'm going to end up using a whole lot because it has a great sound to it, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of unbelievable demos that come out using the percussion section in a very epic sort of cinematic way. Here we have some piano scratches, just to add a little bit of fun to the gang, and you can see this piano scratches aren't very evident, but they add just a little sort of tickle in your ear, you know. Oops. Oh, I need these guys. Here we go. And then we also have, which I don't know why it's muted, but we have this brass also playing that upbeat as well. So the strings and the brass are playing that. All right, so then now we have these sort of brass hits here. They have a really nice puncturing sound to them. And these are, of course, doubling the clusters. So those are really, really fun. And then moving into the last portion of the Metropolis Ark stuff, we have these harsh wind clusters. And then we have the string ricochets, which is when the player bounces the bow on the strings. So then this stuff is from Metropolis Ark 1 or 2. So you can see I'm using this harmonium, which is sort of that drunken Pirates of the Caribbean sound. And then we also have these bass trombones, which are, again, helping out the strings above to sort of add that puncturing sound. So I use the word puncturing a lot, by the way, if you haven't already noticed. I love the word because I think it really identifies what this library is actually doing, which is puncturing you. So we already did that. So, okay, here we go. So this is a combination of Colenio and Pizzicato Bartok, and this is from Metropolis Ark 1. I tend not to overuse this specific articulation because it is so aggressive and bitey. So that's what we have going on there. And then finally, over here we have, some stuff from some different libraries. So we have a little bit from, I believe it's Gypsy from East West. We also have a little bit of Storm Drum 2. We have a little bit of Eduardo Tarante's Era Medieval Legends, just for these the frame drum and the kettle drum, just adding a little bit of that sort of low-end percussion sound. And then we're also using a couple Labs instruments, the charango, which sounds like this. Dulcimer. So finally, what I like to do is just play the sections separately so you can see how they're all sort of building off of each other. So this is just the Metropolis Ark III content. So there's that. This is just the Metropolis Ark 1 and 2 stuff, so not a whole lot of stuff, but... And then here is all of our ethnic stuff. And together. Thank you guys so much for joining me today in this overview of Metropolis Ark III. I hope you and your families enjoy the holidays. I'll be back in 2018 with even more behind the scores, more music theory and composition tutorials. If you guys have any questions about Metropolis Ark III or just in general, please do leave those down below and I'd be happy to answer them. So thank you so much, and I hope that you guys have a good rest of your day. See ya.